Hey everyone, I'm Jacqueline D'Agostino alongside Brady Quinn, and there's a lot of time until we get to the 2024 draft. There's a lot of talent in this upcoming draft class, especially when it comes to quarterbacks. And the one that everyone is talking about, and there's a lot of hype around, and rightfully so, is Caleb Williams. So there's a lot of comps out there, and we'll get to that in just a moment. But what makes Caleb Williams so special and such an elite and unique prospect, in your opinion?
Well, first off, he checks off all the boxes, okay? When you're looking at any sort of prospect at any position, let alone a quarterback, you have to have the prototypical size. He's got that. He's 6'1", 220 pounds, maybe even a little bit heavier than that. His decision making, he's got a high touchdown interception ratio. When you put on the tape, he never puts his team in a bad spot. He's accurate with the football, both from the pocket and on the run, even maybe more so. He's lethal with his accuracy. He's mobile. He can extend plays. He can hurt you with his legs. He's tough to bring down in the open space. He's got the arm strength. He's tough. And the last thing is, I think that what makes him so special is he's got that it factor. He's got the ability to raise the level of everyone else out around him. You could put him into a bad team, bad situation, and he's going to make them better. You don't have to look any further than USC just a season ago, where he helped get them to the Pac-12 championship game. He won the Heisman Trophy largely because they didn't have a great defense, but he was able to distribute the football and make a lot of plays, too, for a team that had to continue to keep building as Lincoln Riley's looking to kind of build on the foundation that he set with Caleb Williams in his first year there.
Yeah, athleticism certainly on his side. He has what our friend Pete Prisco likes to call fire in the belly. Is that the right phrasing that he has?
Pete says that, but, he's actually a very calm, poised, demeanor. Pete always says he gets that back from talking to a quarterback. I'm like, all right, Pete. I don't like to use Pete's evaluation of quarterbacks for pretty much anything.
Pete, if you're watching this, you knew we were just going to bring you up somehow. And let's talk about comps, Brady.
Yeah.
Before we get into it, you don't like player comps. Tell us why.
Well, I think Caleb Williams is his own player. He's extremely unique in the way he plays the game. Not only how he manipulates the pocket, moves around the pocket, even the way he runs downfield. Most guys are going to tuck the ball, they're going to run with it. He runs with it almost like he's holding like a sandwich or something.
Which is make
with the way
nervous.
He runs. It might make some people nervous, but what you see is it actually allows him to have this uncanny ability to then spit the football out quick. So he's got his body in an awkward position, which a lot of people will make the comparison to Patrick Mahomes, and it's accurate and fair, right? Patrick Mahomes got to Kansas City. They were a playoff caliber team. Now he's able to get the AFC Championship game every year and win Super Bowls, right? Caleb Williams has that same sort of ability to be able to make plays, do things that you just don't see many quarterbacks ever are able to do. Put their body in a certain position, still make an accurate throw across the field, across their body. He's got all of that. So I don't like comps for that reason. And I also think the situation that Caleb Williams enters into, which we're going to talk about in a minute, could be drastically different than the Kansas City Chiefs who trade up to take Patrick Mahomes in the first round. That was already a playoff caliber team with Andy Reid and Alex Smith.
Yeah, and let's get into those comps and what offensive scheme he could potentially fit into. He's talked about as being, that looks pretty good just from a picture standpoint, but being a quarterback that can change a franchise. We saw Joe Burrow do it in Cincinnati. Trevor Lawrence on his way potentially to doing that maybe in Jacksonville, but let's get to the teams, of course, starting off with the Arizona Cardinals. Do they make this move and move on from the Kyler Murray era and then, put all their eggs in the Caleb Williams basket? How do you think he fits in with that offense?
Look, they got to 0-1 start. They look like a team that's going to be in position to have the number one overall pick, at least based on the betting odd over or under win total. That's the team that's most likely going to have that number one pick. And as far as talking about all these teams, whoever has that number one pick is not going to trade it away and not take Caleb Williams. I'm sorry. No matter who's the number one pick, they're taking him. He's too good of a prospect. He's too good of a player. And so anyone after number one, I don't care what they offer that number one team, it's not going to be worth it. So if it is the Arizona Cardinals, you'd have to think with Jonathan Gannon, who would be entering into his second year, a new general manager as well, that maybe they want to put their own stamp on this as far as who they have as their quarterback moving forward. The difficulty becomes the contract situation with Kyler Murray. If you had to release him, it'd be a huge dead cap hit, and it's not something that they want to do. If you want to trade him, the problem is his cap hit is somewhere around $52 million in 2024. Ooh. So yes, there's a lot of football left to be played. Kyler Murray will hopefully be able to make it back this season to play and showcase his talents and ability, and we'll see where Arizona finds itself. But the contract situation for Kyler Murray, which is something that Jonathan Gannon and the general manager were not a part of, that's the biggest sticking point. But if Arizona's sitting there at number one, they'd be hard-pressed not to take a player like Caleb Williams.
So you think whether the team who has the number one overall pick needs a quarterback or not, they're going to take Caleb Williams?
Well, most teams that are in the number one spot, they need a quarterback at that spot.
Okay, let's talk about the Patriots, where Mac Jones is the guy right now. Do you think that is a good fit for Caleb?
I don't think. Well, yeah, it could be a great. All these teams are a great fit for Caleb Williams because he's that extraordinary of a player. The thing with New England is there's so many moving parts. I mean, for starters, there's a lot of football left to be played. And I think New England's still going to be competitive in the mix. They're not going to be in striking distance of the number one overall pick, so that right there is a non-starter. The second thing is, Mac Jones, if he has a great year, they would probably exercise the right to pick up his fifth-year option, which means he's still under contract for another couple seasons. And that's the draft pick that Bill Belichick went with. So if he's still the head coach, I'm sure he'd want him to continue to be the quarterback there. Now, if Bill Belichick wasn't to be there for whatever reason, maybe you start to ask that question, what would New England do to try to get up to that number one overall spot? Or they've had that bad of a season where Robert Kraft wants to move on and go with the new head coach. Maybe he wants his new quarterback at that point. But again, I don't think New England's going to be in anywhere close to striking distance to get that number one overall pick.
So all of these teams that we're going to go down are going to be a fit for Caleb Williams in one way or another. But if we get into logistics here, let's talk about Tennessee. A lot of our analysts think that they're kind of a sleeper team in the AFC South right now. Maybe they just need a little bit of a push to get them over the Jags and kind of make them elite.
But for that reason, again, if they're going to be a sleeper team and maybe they make the play, who knows how the whole season ends up.
Sure.
They're not going to be striking distance of the number one pick. They've drafted Will Levis last year, Malik Willis the year before, who had a great preseason. They've got two guys who might be the successors to Ryan Tannehill. So at that point, I look at it and go, I'm not even sure that it's even a fit within their plans of what they want to do. Again, every team would love to have Caleb Williams. Right. Only so many teams are going to be in a position to take him. Take Tennessee off that list. They already want to know they're building towards trying to be a wild card playoff team.
Okay, this next team is interesting as far as dynamics. We're going to talk about the Broncos. Obviously, Sean Payton at the helm right now. Russell Wilson, I don't know. He's doing high knees. He, at his peak, is so elite, but is Caleb Williams the next guy in line in Denver, in your opinion?
There's a number of conversations around this one, too. Look, they're 0-1, so maybe Denver finds itself, if they don't have a successful season with Russell Wilson, they'd be looking at another quarterback, but you've got his contract to think about. It's $85 million in dead cap next year in 2024. Can't cut him, can't move on from there. Can you trade him? Sure, with a $35.4 million cap hit, that's a tradable number if another team sees value in Russell Wilson. So there is that portion of the conversation. And look, maybe Sean Payton, after being with Russell Wilson for a year, says this is not the guy for me. If we can get Caleb Williams, let's go get him. I'm more bullish on the Broncos, though. I think they will be a playoff team this year. I think Sean Payton's going to get them headed back in the right direction. They lost a close one, a divisional matchup this past week. So I don't know that they're even a fit because I don't think they'll be in striking distance. I think Russell's going to be their guy.
Okay, so let's move over to the NFC East where we have the Commanders. Have they found their quarterback? Because it looked pretty promising.
The preseason, I thought Sam Howell looked fantastic. Not so much maybe in this first game, but again, he's young in his career. He's going to continue to build and get better the more he plays. Washington is the most interesting one because you have a new ownership group that's going through this season. They might want to have their stamp of approval on a player that they draft at the most important position at quarterback. And where's Caleb Williams from? He's from the D.C. area. If you want to build a new stadium, how do you put butts in those seats? You go get a guy like Caleb Williams and you find a way of getting there. They're also in a tough division in the NFC East, so they might find themselves in striking distance of that number one overall pick or be able to mortgage enough to then go get the number one overall pick if someone's crazy enough to trade out of the number one spot for Caleb Williams. So there's a lot of reasons why I think Washington could make some sense and they could use him, but again, a lot of football left to be played, and we'll see how things pan out for Ron Rivera and Sam Howell.
I think after the Broncos, this next team is an interesting conversation to have as well with the Vikings. They have JJ, not sure how long he's going to be there when we're looking ahead, but Kirk Cousins, is he going to be their guy? I know there's all the conversation about his struggles in primetime and can he get the job done?
Yeah.
But do you see Caleb Williams potentially going here and being the answer in the long term for Minnesota?
Well, Kirk Cousins is scheduled to be a free agent after this year. So for that reason, they're going to need a quarterback. So the need is definitely there. You've got a general manager, too, who I think maybe wants to put his own stamp on who he brings in as his quarterback. And so there's the potential for that. So we'll see how the rest of the season pans out. Again, I'm a believer in a team that won 13 games just a year ago. They're not going to regress so much where they find themselves in the number one overall spot. And I don't even know if they'll find themselves in the top 5. So to mortgage their future, to give up for the number one spot if someone's crazy enough to trade out of it, it might be a heavy billing, but they will be in need of a quarterback next season, and Minnesota's an interesting one to keep an eye on moving forward.
All right, let's talk about the Seahawks, where we have Geno Smith there for now. Long term, do you think it makes sense for Caleb Williams in Seattle?
Yeah, I mean, look, again, another 0-1 team, really poor showing week one considering what they were just a year ago. And Geno Smith did not replicate what he did, at least so far in a one-game sample size, from what he did last year. And that contract, if you look at it, it's really a one-year deal. After that, Seattle can move on from Geno Smith if they want to. So there's a lot still on the table there. It's definitely a situation to monitor moving forward. You know, Caleb Williams' ability to extend plays and improvise reminds you a little maybe of Russell Wilson sometimes when he first got to Seattle and the early success that they had with the Legion of Boom. But Seattle, again, is a team that I think is still going to be competitive. That NFC West might have a little more parity than we thought based on how LA was able to play against Seattle week one. I'm still not a believer, though, that they're going to be moving on from Geno just after this year. I think he's going to play some good football moving forward.
Okay, and finally, we have to cap off this segment, of course, talking about the Jets. The huge news out of New York. Aaron Rodgers, he's done for the season. Robert Saleh, though, he sounds pretty confident in Zach Wilson, saying he's our guy, kind of putting it out there for the rest of the season. But, of course, we're going to question that and speculate long-term quarterback. They've already gave up a lot just to get Aaron Rodgers. Does it make sense at all for Caleb Williams to be there with the Jets?
No, it really doesn't. And in part because you've got this window still of time with Aaron Rodgers, not obviously this season because he's going to be on IR, or he's on IR, but really the next couple of seasons. He's still under contract. You know, I believe he's not going to retire. I believe he's going to want to come back and try to play this thing out for a couple of seasons in New York. So because of that, I don't know that it makes any sense to invest into that. Now, they could be in a position based on how things go this year, given the quarterback situation moving forward, to make that draft pick. But again, there would be a lot of moving parts. I can't imagine they want to move on from Aaron Rodgers and then trade up all these assets just to try to get that number one overall pick. I think they like what they have moving forward. They just wish Aaron Rodgers was behind center for them.
Yeah, of course. And it's hard to imagine Aaron Rodgers, a future Hall of Famer, that's his last play ever in his career being injured. But I don't know. We'll have to see what happens. I know we went down a lot of teams, but if there was just one that you could pinpoint as the best fit, most likely, all the things, who is it?
Well, Arizona makes the most sense because I think they're the team that's going to be in position right now, right? They start off the season now 0-1. You know, they had a veteran quarterback on the roster in Colt McCoy. Knowing that Kyler Murray was not going to be able to come back to start the season, you thought they would have kept in, went that direction, give them a chance to be competitive. Now, look, Josh Dobbs did well, all things considered, for the position he was put in. But they're sending a clear signal that they want that number one overall pick. They want the shot at Caleb Williams, who's just a little bit further out west there in Southern California. So it will most likely be the Arizona Cardinals as the team that's going to have the opportunity to take Caleb Williams. Now it just comes down to whether or not Caleb Williams is going to end up declaring for the draft.
Yes.
As his dad's already hinted at him potentially saying that, we'll see who's picking number one, and then we'll evaluate whether or not we want to go or if we want to go back to school for another year.
Do you think he stays at USC, or if he doesn't want to go to Arizona, or do you think he just goes to the draft? I mean, regardless, we've seen, like I mentioned at the top, other quarterbacks go into not desirable cities and really turn it around. Joe Burrow with Cincinnati. Do you think Cincinnati was a competitive program. I mean, yeah, they had a couple of down years before he got there. That's how they found themselves in that position. But the reality is they're going to playoffs with Andy Dalton. It was just a matter of being able to build things back up out around the quarterback position to help them out and then finding out Joe Burrow's talents. So the truth of the matter is every situation and circumstance you enter into is different. If it is Arizona, it's been an organization that when they've had a quarterback, they've been successful. They've been competitive. Go back to Kurt Warner, obviously Carson Palmer, some of those guys who went in there and were able to help them get to a Super Bowl, help them get to the playoffs and make runs. Caleb Williams is going to do the exact same thing for them if he is the draft pick. I don't think he's going to go back to school if he has the opportunity to be the number one overall pick. I think he's going to look at the Arizona Cardinals, hypothetically speaking in this case, as a situation where they can then help build out around him. They've kind of been cleaning some things up, at least on their salary cap. Most recently, the difficulty is then still the Kyler Murray contract. And that's something that they're going to have to figure out a way of moving on from, and they have to pay for a little bit early on. But eventually they'll build this thing back up again. All right, Brady Quinn with us here as we are discussing Caleb Williams, his future, where he ends up. A lot of time before the 2024 draft. We'll just have to wait and see what happens.